Hey guys, what is up? It's the Tominator. So let's take a look at the 2018 Pittsburgh Pro. This is the guest posing portion where they brought out the top 7 from the Mr. Olympia this past year on stage together. Obviously, this is off-season mode, so none of these guys are really shredded or in great shape, but they still look pretty impressive. And a lot of them, none of them really look bad. None of them are really overweight. None of them are too bloated. So this is good stuff to see, especially considering it's so rare that we get an opportunity to watch these guys present themselves on stage like this. So yeah, you got your 7-time Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath there. We have Big Ramy, last year's runner-up. We have William Bowneck, who finished in 3rd. We have the ageless Dexter Jackson, who took 4th last year. We have a downsized Sean Roden, who had to pull out of the Arnold Classic this year due to health concerns. I'm not sure exactly what his story was or how he's doing now, but he's clearly a little bit undersized compared to most of these other guys and compared to how we're used to seeing him. So hopefully he will bounce back in time for the Olympia. But then we have Winkler, who's undersized compared to nobody. That guy's just a monster. He took 6th last year. And rounding out the top 7 is Nathan DeAsha. Not to mention the likes of Breon Ansley, the reigning classic physique Mr. Olympia. So pretty awesome stuff to see. And so let's take a look more in depth at their individual posing routines. So, of course, we have Phil Heath here, who looks pretty good for Phil. I mean, the thing with Phil is that he's never really been a super impressive guest poser, because the thing with Phil is that he doesn't have that monstrous mass and the large frame like some of these other guys. So he's not going to look that impressive by comparison because he's not the biggest guy. And the reason that Phil wins is by virtue of his definition, his razor sharp detail and all that, and his completeness, the round 3D muscle belly. So he still has the roundness, but it just doesn't pop the same way when he's holding so much water like this. But he still looks pretty good for him, and that midsection is looking to be not too bad for off-season form. His belly button's no longer sticking out like an udder, so that's good to see. Now we got Big Ramy. In contrast, this is a guy who would win if contests were judged in this manner. Like if these guys were actually judged and awarded according to their off-season form, it would come down to Big Ramy versus Winkler every year now, because these are the two freakiest mass monsters in the game at this point. And Ramy's just astronomically wide, just a ridiculous amount of muscle on his frame, which is pretty large. And a lot of people say that Ramy's legs are too big for his upper body, and I really don't agree with that whatsoever. I think that you can make an argument that Ramy's thighs are a little too big for his calves. I would agree with that. I think that he does need to bring his calves up a little bit in size just to match the rest of his body. But when you look upstairs, I mean, look at the arms, dude. Are you kidding me? Those are massive pythons, and his back is wide as a barn door. His pecs and chest are huge. The delts are big. So what more do you want? The guy is just on another level when it comes to the mass. William Bowneck, however, is more reminiscent of Phil Heath in that he's not the biggest guy, but he thrives on his conditioning and his detail, and also his completeness. So he's almost like a slightly smaller version of Phil Heath in a lot of ways when you think about that, especially in certain poses and certain body parts like his biceps, his triceps, even the roundness that he has through the delts and pecs as well, and the sweep in the thighs. He's very similar to Phil in so many ways. But all things being equal, bigger is better, and Phil is essentially a bigger and I would say better version of Bowneck. So I don't see Bowneck being able to take that next step just yet and dethrone someone like Phil Heath. Now, he could beat somebody like Ramy. If Ramy doesn't come in at 100%, Bowneck could have arguably beat him last year, and in fact, he was doing so after prejudging. So this is a guy that you really got to look out for, because in today's bodybuilding, conditioning is the name of the game. So if somebody really does their homework and brings their A game, like William Bowneck, he can easily dethrone a lot of these bigger guys. He's got the talent and the genetics to do so. Same with Dexter Jackson. Again, not the biggest guy. He's a pretty short bodybuilder. He looks bigger than someone like Bowneck because he has longer limbs, right? He's longer through the arms and the legs, I would imagine as well. But they're roughly the same height, believe it or not. And so Dexter is also a shorter and slightly smaller version of Phil now. And the thing with Dexter here is that I think he looks good, but he doesn't look that big for off-season form. I've seen Dexter in the past, in previous years, And there's sometimes where he actually looks massive, like he looks like a monster. And here he looks more or less the same way that you would expect, like in terms of size, that you would expect to see him in contest shape. So I mean, that might be an indication that he's going to be a little bit smaller this year than we're used to seeing him, but we'll see. And Rolly Winkler, this guy right here is just a real freak among freaks, and it's awesome to watch this guy. Especially guys like Rolly and Ramy are just made for this, man. These are the guys that I get more excited. I think are more impressive to look at in off-season mode compared to anybody because they have the freaky mass, man, and that's really what all you can really see at this point, right? Because you were not able to catch those striations, and you can't see any peeled glutes or none of that stuff. So we're not catching the definition. So what else is there? Well, there's size, and that's what this guy has in spades. I would actually say that Rolly might even be more impressive than Ramy in terms of being pound for pound perhaps bigger than him. So lastly, we have Nathan DeAsha. This guy was definitely the most defined of anybody here. And the reason being is that he's going to compete, I believe, in the New York Pro contest, which is only about a week away now. So he's only about maybe a week or two out of a show. So we should expect to see him a lot more shredded than these other guys who are up to 6 months away from their next competition. So that said, I think DeAsha, who came in 7th place last year, is really one of the brightest young stars in the game at this point in time. And in a less talented, smaller show like the New York Pro, not to knock any of these guys who are competing in it, but it's not the same level of competition as the Olympia or the Arnold. And I think that for that reason, DeAsha has a real solid shot of winning it. I haven't seen the official competitor list yet for that show, but I would imagine that DeAsha should be one of the front runners for that event. So we'll see in a couple weeks how it pans out for him, but he's very impressive. So that's all for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.